Hello, this is Dr. Patrick Porter. I want to welcome you to the webinar tonight. Today we're going to be talking about BrainTap and how biohacking and brainwave training works and how you can use it to improve yourself and also maybe supercharge your practice. I want to make you aware on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a place where you can post questions. If you post the question there, I'll answer it if it's appropriate at the time, or I'll answer them all at the end of the webinar. So go ahead and write down your questions there. I'll get to them when I can. Hopefully I'll fill you in on some details. For those that don't know who I am, I'm the founder of BrainTap Technologies. I invented the first portable light and sound device back in the 80s. We were in Scottsdale, Arizona with a company called Light and Sound Research. I started working with chiropractors and other health and wellness professionals about 1989, and we've been helping them to implement a brain-based solution into their practice ever since. I'm going to be speaking at the Brim Hall homecoming, so hopefully you'll share this with your colleagues, your friends, and we'll see you all in Tempe at the Brim Hall event. So as we move forward here, I want to make you aware, first of all, if you think of biohacking, this term didn't exist, of course, but David Asprey created it. And when I was just at his event, I had a chance to speak in front of these biohackers. And one thing I can say about them, most of the biohackers that we evaluated through our, whether it be through our EEG device or our heart rate variability device, they had some of the best nervous systems we've ever evaluated. So whatever they're doing, they're working well. And he asked me to talk about brain health. So when we talk about brain stress, all stress itself is brain stress. So as we think about that, it's a silent killer. So when you think about why would you want to biohack, when you think of hacking, most people think of a negative, but what we're talking about here is how can we accelerate our body's natural capacity to heal? Some people say that time heals all wounds, but now we live in a fast-paced world where we're looking over our shoulder all the time, we're racing to the finish line, and we need to really get things done right away. So sometimes that can be good, sometimes it can be bad. Now, one thing that we know for certain is that stress moves to those weakest points in the body. And when it's tapping to those weakest points, it could be someplace in the spine or in the foot or in the arm or the shoulder. But when it goes there, that stress, especially if they're under stress, they're going to feel more and more pain, because stress typically happens only in a brainwave known as beta. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that for those that aren't familiar with the different brain waves and how they work. Also, I want to touch a little bit today on how stress affects your genes, because now with biohacking and gene SNPs and everything we have out there about epigenetics, stress is one of the biggest things that causes those stress hormones to turn on, and they actually change the way our physiology is affected. So I want you to make you aware of that there are solutions to this. When we're calling biohacking versus brain hacks, we really want to use our brain to maximize our clinical results and get the best life right now. And that's what we want to talk about. So first of all, when we look at somebody's natural brain waves, this is a typical brainwave. When you're looking at it here, the spectrogram of brainwave activity. Now, this is when you see the delta, which is all the way to the left in the red, 41% delta. In fact, that's really rather low. And when you're at the Brim Hall event, you can always come over, and we usually have 2 or 3 of these HRVs where we can scan your nervous system and tell you how you're doing. This was picked up from something called ECG. So we can pick it up from the heart, because your heart, believe it or not, has 40,000 neuron connections, which means your heart has its own brain. And that heart brain actually communicates with your brain between your ears and coordinates activity in your gut brain. So when we talk about these 3 different brains, what we're reading here is the electrical activity in the brain as it's reflected or mirrored in the heart. So after a BrainTap session, just to show you a brain hack, this is what the brain looks like in this person after the session. And it's more in line with what we really want. You want to see between 40 and 45% beta, anywhere between 25 to 30% alpha, a low amount of theta, and maybe even lower amounts of delta. But as you use techniques like BrainTap, you'll find that your brain begins to regulate in what we call a symphony of brain waves. Each of these brain waves are important, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about them so you understand. The gamma, which is the 19 to 25 hertz, could be even up to 40 hertz, that gamma brainwave is associated with a lot of things: heightened creativity, healing. And if you have a high amount of gamma, you probably don't have to worry too much about amyloid plaque or Alzheimer's, because gamma, it acts as like a tuning fork that resonates at such a frequency that amyloid plaque breaks down in the brain when you have high amounts of gamma. Beta is typically the one 13 to 19 hertz. That's usually associated with fear, frustration, anxiety, but it's really the reactionary mind. It's that part of our mind that reacts to situations. Now, for those of you that follow Bruce Lipton, he would tell you that only 5% of your everyday awareness is in the beta consciousness or your everyday awareness. The other 95% is in the other activities of the brain, or the alpha, theta, delta region, or the unconscious or subconscious, as it's called. So when we dip into alpha, we call alpha the intuitive mind. And if you don't have a high amount of alpha, some bad things can happen to your brain and your physiology. In fact, you would probably show up to be on the spectrum of autism. When we do scan people who are in the autistic spectrum, we find that they have little or no alpha. It could be as low as 0. It could be, 5 or 10%. But you really want to have, as I said earlier, anywhere between 25 to 30% alpha. Now, if you have too much alpha going on, or if you have a patient with too much alpha, they're going to show up as attention deficit, which means they're going to be hyperactive and they're going to be bouncing off the walls. So you really want to, that's one of the big things that BrainTap does, is balances out these brain waves so that they're in the right frequency response. Now, theta is the one that most of your patients have a deficit in. And what I mean by that is that they don't have enough theta, so they can't go to sleep very well. With 1 in 3 people out there in the world having sleeping problems, then theta is one of the things that we need to help. Now, one of the nice things for those of you on the call that are chiropractors, we know that when a chiropractor makes an adjustment based on the work of Richard Barwell with NeuroInfinity and his device, is that we know that you're basically, at least for anywhere between 3 to 5 seconds, you are creating a perfect brainwave when you do that adjustment. We've seen it so many times. And then depending upon how the brain regulates, with 70% of the nervous system in the brain, that nervous system adjustment, whether you use the spine, which is called the keyboard to the brain, or you adjust the limbs, you're really adjusting the brain and how the brain communicates with the body. And that's where delta comes in. There's a lot of activities. Now, we should see 10% or less delta if the brain's operating correctly while we're awake. It will be much higher, of course, if we would do the scan in the evening. Now, when we think about what's going on here in the brain, when we look at the brain here, there's a few things I want to bring to your attention. When we bring in the frontal lobes, which is a part of the brain that is usually associated with beta consciousness and being awake, it also helps to create dopamine. And that dopamine has a real response. Most people are addicted to dopamine and what's going on there. So we want to make sure that people that have a dopamine response or an addiction potential, that we don't trigger that too often. So with the BrainTap, though, we want to keep the frontal lobes active during these sessions, because during stressful situations, typically the frontal lobe shuts down, which is not what we want in our high stress world that we live in. So we want to keep the frontal lobe going. Now, next is the temporal lobes. This has to do with alpha activity. So if, as I mentioned, any of these brain regions, if somebody has damage in any of these regions of the brain, it's going to affect their ability or their capacity to produce neurotransmitters. The brain makes just a small amount of the neurotransmitter. Most of those neurotransmitters are being made by the gut. In fact, up to 90% of them are being made in the gut. So if there's a temporal lobe problem, or if they don't get enough alpha activity, then they're not going to produce acetylcholine, which is necessary. Then we go to the parietal lobes. Now, GABA is produced when somebody's in the theta brainwave activity, but if they don't produce enough theta waves, they won't produce GABA and they won't sleep very well. Right now, in the medical curriculum and in the medical research, they're doing all they can to produce synthetic GABA, because this is an area of the brain that or an area of our neurophysiology that's being damaged by our high stress. So one of the things that BrainTap really excels at is producing theta. And that means that it's instructing the body to produce more GABA, which helps people to sleep better. So people will sleep better when using BrainTap usually. Now, when you're in delta, this has to do, of course, with rest, relaxation, reorganizing, and all of those features of the brain. But this occipital lobe, it also has to do with serotonin. Most of you are probably familiar with serotonin uptake inhibitors. And my theory is, and it's been proven out by the people we're working with, is that most people have too much serotonin. They don't need to keep it in their brain. What they need to do is flush out the toxic serotonin and refresh it. Just like any other neurochemistry in our body works best with our own neurophysiology, not by putting in a pill or a substance that's foreign to it, because the body then has to adjust to it or respond to it. Now I'm going to talk about BrainTap. There's 4 things that the BrainTap does as we break it down. So we show here someone using our BrainTap with one of the head harnesses and our gut pad. We call it inflammation buster, so that while they're listening to the BrainTap, they can be healing the brain and bringing the gut back into balance. Light is the most underprescribed nutrient that we have on the earth right now. We live in houses, we drive in cars, we don't go out as much as we can. These bodies were designed to move and breathe and be in sunlight. But of course, that's not the kind of lifestyle that most of us live. Some people do, but most of us don't. So we're going to use a biohack to bring more light in. We're going to also bring in a balanced sound. And sound is very important to our body because sound gives light depth and allows us to function in our world. So I'm going to be explaining how that works too. Sound and light therapy has been used since the dawn of time, but what we've done with the BrainTap is we've synchronized it into the headset, organized it through each and every experience, and then deliver it through an app. And as we do that, we also send vibrations in. Most of you are probably familiar with different frequency response tools like PEMF and other tools that use frequency and vibration, like the Beamer, which we see at the Brim Hall event. Well, we're sending frequencies in through the ears. We can't see it right now because she's wearing the earphone, but we have ear lights, and those ear lights are actually sending a frequency of 297 hertz frequency as a beat frequency with light, with 633 frequency light and 633 nanometer light and 470 nanometer light. And that light is being absorbed by the hemoglobin that's passing through the ears. The reason we chose the ears, it's an easy way to deliver light into the brain, because all the blood in the body circulates through the ears every 3 to 4 minutes. It circulates through the body in about 45 seconds. Because of the restriction of blood flow through the ears, it slows down enough that we can actually permeate the hemoglobin with the photic cells. And as the photons are absorbed by the hemoglobin, it circulates through the body. It then will find apoptosis, cell death, and it will bring that cell back to life. It does it through vasodilation, blood flow, and all the things that you know about laser, we can do with low-level light therapy. It just takes a bigger dose. So our dose on the BrainTap is 20 minutes. When that happens, we create neuroplasticity. In fact, most of you heard me talk about the book, Saving Your Brain, in past webinars. Dr. Kelly Miller, who wrote the book, Saving Your Brain, he did an experiment just recently with women 50 to 65 years old. And these were women with onset dementia. And what we found out using a device called the New Mind is that the brain, the left hemisphere, was slowing down before the right hemisphere, which means brain speed wasn't equal or matched. We find that to be true not only in dementia patients, but also in attention deficit patients. So what we did was we designed a series with the BrainTap to balance out these 2 hemispheres. We had them use the BrainTap for 6 weeks, 3 times a week. By the 6th week, we were able to measure neuroplasticity change of over 64%. So when you're thinking about changing the brain and what's going on, and that was with only the BrainTap. If we would have added in, Dr. Miller is a chiropractor, he can get better results by using the chiropractic adjustment first and then the BrainTap afterwards. But even just using BrainTap alone, we got some pretty phenomenal results. And so when you add the physical component of a chiropractic adjustment, you can even get better and better results. So let's talk about light and why it's so important. Cells love to grow. The only thing cells do constantly is regenerate, but they need the right materials, right? The light, which is photons, which brings about energy donation, energy production, and regeneration. Without light at the cellular level, the body cannot create ATP. And without ATP, the body does not have the currency in which to heal the body. What this means to those out there that are using great supplements, I know that a lot of you use Optimum Nutrition, which is an excellent nutrition brand, that when the body's relaxed, we know that when the body's in a parasympathetic state, it's going to absorb more of the nutrients from those great supplements than it will if it's in a high stress state. And of course, eating nutritionally well is going to reduce some of the stress on the body. But in order to really disengage or bring the autonomic nervous system into balance, we really need to reboot the brain. And that's where the BrainTap comes in with light, sound, and vibration. So what is neuroplasticity, just for a moment? So it's the brain's ability to reorganize. And you can also think of it in the same way you might think of a computer processing power. The more neuron connections, the more processing power. The less neuron connections, less processing power. You can also equate neuroplasticity to the ability to adapt, improvise, and overcome in problematical situations. That's why when we see the elderly, unfortunately, they're not able to think through problems. They're not able to solve problems because the brain is no longer being used the same way it was. But we know the brain can be healed at any age. The study that I mentioned earlier, these were women 50 to 65 years old. So we've seen it. We've seen actually women. We did a scan with someone in West Palm Beach, Florida, who was 102 years old, and we saw massive neuroplasticity change. So there's no limit to when the brain can change and how we can improve it. We just need to get the right nutrients in, the stress out, and the toxins out. So this neuroplasticity allows the neurons in the brain to compensate for injury and disease. So if somebody has, everyone listening to this webinar has had a brain trauma, whether it happened when you were a child, when you were in sports, or through an automobile accident or fall on the ice. Our brains, what we have today is the neuroplastic changes that our brain made when we compensated for injury. So for most of it's really good. For others, it might not be. If you're not following the news, you should look up on YouTube. There's a guy that actually jumped in a swimming pool, got a massive concussion. When he came through, he was actually a concert pianist. He never took a piano lesson. So we have no idea what the brain is capable of doing or how we can master our life if our brain is working in optimum ways. So when we think about this neuroplasticity, we're going to make this axonal sprouting happen so the undamaged axons grow new nerve endings, which means your brain can rebuild itself. We just have to bring about the right nutrients, the right environment, the right situation, and then the brain can change. You're not locked into any old behaviors, in other words. This is somebody's brain that we did a test with our technology with when we were using the brain wrap and the BrainTap. And what you can see here is the top is where you can see the lesion really in the brain, and then the one at the bottom is what happened after 6 weeks of care. So light therapy can go in, start to reduce the inflammation, improve circulation, and get the brain to heal itself. The same way that most people talk about the spine and how it's self-healing and self-correcting, this power that made the body can heal the body, but it just needs the right nutrients. So when we produce energy directly at the source, there's a mitochondrial release, which means we can turn on the engine of the cell. And as long as we have circulation there, we're able to kickstart the recovery of the brain. So each time, each light therapy session, there's going to be a better and better production of ATP, a better healing in that area. So as blood flow and circulation improves and we get the toxins out, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment, how that happens, the brain and the body start to improve. So we're going to do a few things. First of all, we use retinal flashing, or what in the science is called frequency following response. So it's very much like the picture you see here. When you're looking at the ocean, and when we go to the ocean, we relax, that's because the ocean itself operates at 10 cycles per second, which happens to correlate with alpha. So when you're sitting by the ocean, you're creating that acetylcholine response, which is the same drug you feel when you're in love and you start feeling good, and it's healing to the body. So these natural places are very healing. When we go to the mountains and we're sitting on the mountain and we're meditating or relaxing or having a conversation, we love those because the mountains themselves operate between 7 and 8 hertz frequency, or 7 to 8 cycles per second. That happens to be the theta brainwave. So when we're up there, we're actually producing GABA, and that GABA is going to help us to sleep and have intuitive thoughts and maybe even breakthroughs in our inventions like the inventors of the past. The reason we need to do these things is we usually live in the city, right? We usually see something like this. Busy cities are 18 plus cycles per second. That's high beta. There's fear, there's frustration, there's anxiety, and the body doesn't function as well in those states of mind as you would in a deeper, more relaxed state of alpha and theta. So the BrainTap's going to give people a way to escape to their own personal relaxing space just by closing their eyes, allowing the light, sound, and vibration to guide them through the technique. Now, one of our teachers here, this is Cynthia, my wife, and I, with Bruce Lipton, he comes out to Quantum University quite often and talks about different things, but he says every atom, molecule, or substance has its own unique oscillating pattern or vibration, which can be measured in an electromagnetic field. So when we think about this, when we're using light, sound, and vibration, we're changing every atom, molecule, and substance to start to oscillate. The body likes to respond to its environment and create harmony in there. That's what the frequency following response does. Now, one of the nice things we can do is we have a piece of technology, the BrainTap HRV, where we can monitor this. One of the things we like to tell practitioners is don't tell them, show them something's happening. And you can see here on the left is the first scan, and on the right is the is the scan after a BrainTap session. And when you show people this, you could also use this when you're giving supplementations. You can also use this when you're doing your chiropractic adjustment. And so when you come over and see us at the Brim Hall event, you'll be able to get one of these scans done, and you can see how your nervous system's doing. And the nice thing is, as you show them this, we get this because we can send a low-level current through the body, and then we can measure the resistance to that in every cell, system, and organ of the body, and it can feed back. So it's a feedback loop that tells the software what's going on in the different parts of the body. And we'll take a deeper dive into this in just a moment. Now, this is Dr. Emoto, and he wrote the book, The Secret Life of Water. Unfortunately, Dr. Emoto is not with us anymore, but the reality is that every thought we think, every action we take, every supplement that we put into our body, every activity we participate is changing our brain through neuroplasticity. And water holds a memory. So what we want to do is we want to start working with the body and changing the memory of our body so our body can remember its optimum state of health and vitality. We do this through a neurosensory algorithm that we created that trains the brain through this sequence to move through a cycle of sleep. Now, what's so important about a cycle of sleep is each time you move through a cycle of sleep, you're building up your neurotransmitter bank account, not just the 4 that I mentioned earlier, but all the neurotransmitters. You have to go through these cycles anywhere between 4 to 6 times every night to really build up your, let's say, chemical bank account for the next day. So we're using specialized music that does this frequency response. When we start triggering acetylcholine or we start triggering GABA, it's because our body is naturally responding to those. As soon as it discovers that this is very safe and can do this, the brain and body begin to harmonize with these frequencies and create a healthy environment for vitality to grow and health. And the energy comes from within. So as we create this ATP through this combination of light, sound, and vibration, the body absorbs that into the system and starts to make repairs. We also use positive psychology because it's been proven that high energy words, high impact phrases, positive thoughts have a direct influence over the gene expression of the body. And we want to have a positive response. We would never use negative conditioning or negative programming. That's been proven a long time ago not to work, and it's not effective. We're also going to use guided imagery to speed up learning because all behaviors that you have, your patients have, your family members have, everyone you see are learned behaviors. We learn from our parents, from our friends, our family members, our teachers and preachers. All of this goes into our subconscious and feeds back who and what we are. And it patterns the way our brain thinks, acts, and responds. So the key here is to get the brain to be neuroplastic so that we can change when we need to change and perform differently in different social situations. So what happens? This is a piece of technology that shows the coherency between your heart and brain, which is the gold standard for health right now. So we can scan the body. This is before a BrainTap session. You can see that they had 33% coherency before the session. They're not doing very well. That's not in the positive side of the coherency. But after the session, this person was able to bring it up to 96%. Now, typically we would see a 30 to 40% improvement from one session, meaning the way the heart communicates with the brain and the way the brain communicates with the heart. There's a reason that more people die on Monday morning of a heart attack than any other day of the week. It's because they're not feeling it. They're not in love with their job. They're not in love with their life. Now they've got to start a whole nother week again. So part of the goal of BrainTap is to help you to fall back in love with your life, yourself, and your vision of the future. Now, we also need biohacks for this neurological epidemic we're in. If you're on this podcast right now, you probably own a cell phone, just like this gentleman here. And that cell phone can be a good thing or it could be a bad thing, depending upon how often you look at it, when you put it down. Do you check it like the average person checks their cell phone over 60 times a day? And even more if you look at other literature. So every time it dings, every time it vibrates, do you pick it up and look at it? That's going to disrupt your neurological function. It's something we call sympathetic survival syndrome. So the sympathetic survival syndrome is going to affect different things. Now it happens because we live in a fast-paced lifestyle, right? We live fast. I mean, days are going very fast. When we were young and it was summer seemed to last forever. But as the dendrite connections in the brain's wiring gets wiring and firing together, time seems to fly because there's not much new under the sun. That's why if you want more life out of your days, start doing new things, change it up a little bit, put down the phone, get outside, play with your kids or your grandkids, get out there and do something physical, get the brain active. With the 24-hour emails and text, there's no turning it off. So what I recommend is keeping your phone away from your bedstand, plugging it in another room, turning off your alerts between, let's say 10 o'clock at night and 8 in the morning, whatever your sleep cycle is, or when you're winding down. So you're not constantly changing your brain structure to look at emails or text. So what happens, of course, in this sympathetic survival syndrome is there's all this uptime and no downtime. It's been clinically proven that we need rest and recovery. Some of you might have seen the magazine, the Iron Man magazine, where Doug Grant had featured us. I had written an article and he placed it in Iron Man, where we talk about acetylcholine for weightlifting. When we think about weightlifters, a lot of people think, oh, you've got to build up all this muscle. But it's been proven clinically that if you take time to visualize and relax, especially during and after a workout, you can build more muscle. So it seems counterintuitive, but the truth is that we need downtime just as much as we need uptime. Now, unfortunately, what's happened in this neurological epidemic is they have shorter and shorter attention spans. It used to be we would have about 10 minutes of commercials for an hour-long television show. It's almost 20 minutes now, and in some situations, even more than that, where we see commercials breaking up the content of a television show just because people don't have the attention span to stay there and stay engaged that long. Now, this is someone's brain. We can actually track the neuro connections in the brain and how much energy is flowing across the brain. This person right here, before the BrainTap session, had 40% neurological activity, which means they were only processing with 40% of their brain's capacity. This is actually pretty high to what we scan mostly. After the session was done, they were functioning at 88%. Now, anything 50 to 100% is considered good, but of course, the higher the number, the better. So when you're processing at 88%, you're going to have a lot of high energy. You're going to have fast processing speed. Brain speed is so important to, especially as a doctor or someone running their own business, so that you can solve problems. the whole idea is when you're given a problem, you create a solution. So BrainTap puts your brain in the best possible place to create brain speed and help you to process information faster and better. Now this is a delta hack or a sleeping hack that I found out about, and I like to share on my talks because everyone's talking about detoxing the body, and most of you know about thoughts, traumas, and toxins, but you don't have a good solution to detox the brain. It's very hard to detox the brain because we have a blood-brain barrier. So how do you get toxins out of the brain? Well, your brain's designed to do that. It has its own internal plumbing system. This internal plumbing system is only turned on at the deepest levels of sleep. It's a cleanup ritual that only occurs when you're in deep delta sleep, which is a delta burst. This delta burst is tied to our circadian rhythms. So as you sleep through the night and you reach that deep delta sleep, that's when your brain is detoxing. If your brain never gets a chance to get into that deep delta sleep, you never detox. You never get rid of the toxins that are wrapped up in the brain. Now, it will show up as, like most of you know about leaky gut, but people can also get leaky brain, where they get foggy brain fog, they get headaches, they get pain in the brain. The key is to get the deep level 4 sleep necessary to turn on this cleaning ritual and detox the brain. Now, the nice thing about delta burst is that's how you get your energy for the next day. So the length of time you sleep isn't as important. It's important, but the most important thing is the depth of sleep that you get. You need at least 1 hour. So if you have an Oura ring or a smart watch that tracks your time, or something that's in your bedroom that tracks your sleep cycles, when you look at your deep sleep, you'll notice that every time you have an hour plus of deep sleep, you get a better sleep score. That's because everyone knows now that deep level 4 sleep is the key to rejuvenating health in the body and keeping your body function the way it was genetically intended. Now, a lot of people think about weight loss or using weight loss in their system. What does BrainTap do, and how do we hack the metabolism using light, sound, and vibration? Well, this is someone before a session. They're not doing too bad here. They're bringing in 52 units of energy. They're burning 68. That means this person's body is actually in a fat burning state. But after the session, you can see now they went from 120 metabolic energy resources to 363. Light gives energy to the body. This is a direct correlation to ATP production. So now with all this information, with all this energy, they're now bringing in 149 and using 214. This is a fat burning machine that can, in the higher your metabolism, the more healthy you are, the more health you have in your system. So you want to have high energy and then be able to turn that energy off and go to sleep at night. So this is a sign of what happens, and why when we were featured in People magazine, we were able to show hundreds of people that had taken half their weight off and kept it off for 5 years because their metabolism shifted. Now, as long as they continue to do BrainTap, get a chiropractic adjustment, they're going to go ahead, and we know if they do at least every 72 hours something to boost their metabolism, like BrainTap, or a chiropractic adjustment, they're going to keep their metabolism humming along here, and they'll be able to keep their weight off. Now, when we talk about biohacking with BrainTap, what is all involved? For those of you who've never tried the BrainTap, well, first thing we do is we're going to use words. Words are very important because studies have shown that words can change up to 1,200 gene expressions. Yes, you heard me right. The words you choose can change up to 1,200 expressions of your gene. So you can turn those genes on or off based on the words you say to yourself or the words you use with others. We're also going to use binaural beats. And binaural beats are a way to synchronize the brain using the cortical response of the brain, the limbic brain, the reticular activating system. What it's going to do, it's going to be listening for anything that's strange and unusual. And when it hears a beat frequency, let's say of 200 in one ear and 210 in the other ear, it's going to hear or listen to 10 cycles, because that part of the brain always measures the difference between the two ears, and it will only hear the one that's in the middle. And that's how binaural beats work. Then what we do is we use our algorithm to guide the brain from being in the wide awake beta state through alpha into theta, and sometimes even into delta, and then back at the end, or if it's a delta session, just dropping you off in delta and giving you a good night's sleep. We also layer that with isochronic tones because not always do people hear perfectly in their right or left ear. So we've layered in isochronic tones that give us a nice balance. Isochronic tones are mono. So when I showed the picture of the ocean or the mountains, the planet itself is considered an isochronic tone generator, meaning it doesn't need a stereo environment in order for it to change the cortical responses in the brain. We put all that together in our neuroacoustic harmonics, which means we balance that in with the music that we're using, and then we add in light for auricular therapy. Now, when we use light, they know that the body is holographic in nature. So in the ear itself, for those of you that use laser in the ear, because a lot of doctors will hit the meridian points, the auricular points in the ear to help reduce pain or even stop smoking or help people lose weight by using those pressure points or those auricular points with laser or with needles, with stones, with different ways. What we're going to do is we're going to use light to do that. The light is going to look for the path of least resistance. So once that ear, the photons are filled up, because remember, the blood is restricted in the ear. So it's building up, the ears could actually get hot. But as soon as the meridians are cleared, which means we push enough energy in there, the energy will run through the body as it was intended. Once all that happens at one time, we get a response. Instead of it being the stress response, or the freeze response, we're going to get the relaxation response. And that relaxation response is used for healing, for achievement, for learning, or just simply for pleasure, for just rebooting your system. We naturally crave these environments of health and vitality. Now, most people want to know about how does this biohack affect our aging? We haven't found a way to stop the aging process, but we can certainly slow it down. So this doctor that we scanned here came in at 62 years old. Biological age 57, that's pretty good because most people that we scan at the clinic level are actually biologically older than their actual age. But after the BrainTap session, you can see his nervous system came back online, and instead of acting like a 62-year-old, his nervous system is acting like a 34-year-old. So I like to remind people what Wayne Dyer once said. Wayne Dyer said, never let an old person inhabit your body. And as long as your spine is flexible, your brain is nimble, and you have energy flowing through your nervous system, you're going to be at a lower biological age. Again, our bodies were designed to move and breathe and to reduce the stress that's on them. I mean, we have this constant barrage of stress, and we need to release that stress so that our body can do what it does best. I wanted to point out that BrainTap is used by many sports teams out there. In fact, many of our chiropractors are doctors to different sports teams. This happens to be Sporting KC players, and they're using their BrainTap at their facility. They have a 20-station brain tapping room where they actually use the BrainTap in relation to these compression boots that help them to get the bad blood out of their legs. So that's one way people are using in their clinic. This year at the CES show in 2019, our app, which I'm going to give each of you the ability to download this app for free at the end of this presentation, this app was voted the best new health app of the year at the Consumer Electronics Show. So it's a pretty big deal, and you get to use it for free if you don't already have it. If you're not someone who's using BrainTap right now, you can download that app after we're done with this webinar, and you can just see what it is for you and see how it works. Now, this is Forbes magazine, and they did a review of our app because when you think about it in the financial world, they're highly stressed. So this author talks about how he used BrainTap to get rid of the stress, and he recommends that everyone use their BrainTap. Now, if you go to this site, getbraintap.com, if you type in getbraintap.com, you can fill out this form for the free gift. There's going to be a thing there that says 15-day free gift. You just go ahead and sign in. You'll get 15 days in that free gift, and you'll get a copy of my book, Thrive in Overdrive. The other thing that you'll have at your disposal is you will also see that the book Thrive in Overdrive, but you'll get the 15 days. And then if you want to pursue it, you can call us at BrainTap or contact us through email at info@braintap.com, and we can get you information about how you can implement this in your practice. So that's what I have to share with you tonight about BrainTap and biohacking with the brain. I'm open to any questions. If you want to type them into the question area, if we're done, I'll give it a few, 30 seconds here. If there's no questions, then we'll go ahead and end the call. And I look forward to seeing you all at the Brim Hall Homecoming. And you can go to the BrainTap again. Go to getbraintap.com, download the free app, check it out for yourself. Contact us, and we have a special program too where you can get a BrainTap for yourself, start using it, and you can apply it to any of our licensing programs. So if you're curious about what to do, the first step, very easy. Type in getbraintap.com, fill out the information. You'll be sent a link, download the app. There's no credit card necessary. Just go ahead and start trying it. If you know anyone at all that isn't sleeping well, give them this app, and then you'll see 9 out of 10 people, when they use it for less than a week, they're going to be sleeping through the night, no problems. So again, there's no questions. So this is Dr. Patrick Porter with BrainTap Technologies. I want to thank you all for being on the webinar today. I look forward to seeing you all and helping you to maximize clinical results and help people live their best life now. And if you have any questions, please call us at BrainTap. I'm willing to talk to anyone. Just call and set up an appointment with my assistant, Talina, if you want to go over anything that you saw here today that you might have questions about.